Curious George. This is George. He lived in Africa. He was very happy. He had one fault. He was too curious. One day, George saw a man. He had on a large yellow straw hat. The man saw George too. What a nice little monkey, he thought. I would like to take him home with me. The man put his hat on the ground, and of course, George was curious. He came down from a tree to look at the very large yellow hat.
Let me see.
Turn the page. The hat had been on the man's head. George thought it would be nice to have it on his own head. He picked it up and put it on. The hat covered George's head. He couldn't see. The man picked him up quickly and popped him into a bag. George was caught. The man with the big yellow hat put George into a little boat, and a sailor rowed them both across the water to a big ship. George was sad, but he was still a little curious. On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the bag. George sat on a little stool, and the man said, "George, I'm going to take you to a big zoo in a big city. You'll like it there. Now run along and play, but don't get into trouble." George promised to be good, but it's easy for little monkeys to forget. On the deck, he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. Finally, he had to try. It looked easy, but...
What? You got into trouble?
Oh, what happened?
What happened?
First, this.
What?
He dove into the water. And then this. His head went under. Where is George? The sailors looked and looked. At last they saw him struggling in the water and almost all tired out.
Can I ask? Why has did something?
After that, George was more careful to be a good monkey, until at last the long trip was over.
No more.
George said goodbye to the kind sailors. He and the man with the yellow hat walked off the ship and onto the shore, and on into the city, to the man's house.
Who's my house? Who?
After a good meal and a good pipe, George felt very tired. He crawled into bed and fell asleep at once.
What happened?
The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo. George watched him. He was fascinated. Then the man went away. George was curious. He wanted to telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun! He's on the telephone just like the man in the yellow hat. Ding-a-ling! Ding-a-ling! George had telephoned the fire station. The firemen rushed to the telephone. "Hello, hello," they said. but there was no answer. Then they looked for a signal on the big map that showed where the telephone call had come from. They didn't know it was George. They thought that it was a real fire.
Was it? No.
Nope. Hurry, hurry. The firemen jumped on the fire engines and on to the hook and ladders. Ding-a-dong, ding-dong. Everyone out of the way. Hurry, hurry, hurry. The firemen rushed into the house. They opened the door. No fire? Only a naughty little monkey? Look at that naughty little monkey. Oh, catch him, they cried. George tried to run away. He almost did, but he got caught in the telephone wire and... A thin fireman caught one arm and a fat fireman caught on the other. You fooled the fire department. They said, we will have to shut you up where you can't do any more harm. Oh no. They took him away and shut him up in prison.
Will they never be?
We'll see. George wanted to get out. He climbed up to the window to try the bars. Just then, the watchman came in. He got on the wooden bench to catch George, but the watchman was too big and heavy. The bed tipped up. The watchman fell over, and quick as lightning, George ran out through the open door.
What happened? And what did the guys do?
You will see.
What?
He hurried through the building and out on the roof, and then he was lucky to be a monkey. Out he walked onto the telephone wires quickly and quietly over the guard's head. George walked away. He was free. Down in the street, outside the prison wall, stood a balloon man. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother. George watched. He was curious again. He felt he must have a bright red balloon. He reached over and tried to help himself, but...
What?
We'll see. Instead of one balloon, the whole bunch broke loose, and in an instant the wind whisked them a wall away, and with them went George, holding tight with both hands.
Oh, what happened next?
Up, 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 he sailed higher and higher. The houses looked like toy houses and the people like dolls. George was frightened. He held on very tight.
What happened when he was there?
Well, at first, the wind blew in great gusts. Then it quieted. Finally, it stopped blowing altogether. George was very tired. Down, down he went. Bump! On the top of the traffic light. Everyone was surprised. The traffic got all mixed up. George didn't know what to do. And then he heard someone call, George! He looked down and he saw his friend.
Who was it? The guy with the yellow hat?
That's right. The man with the yellow hat.
What happened to him?
George was very happy. The man was happy too. George slid down the post, and the man with the big yellow hat put him under his arm, and then he paid the balloon man for all the balloons, and then George and the man climbed into the car, and at last, away they went.
So people's dad?
To the zoo. What a nice place for George to live.